rest of his teammates, and we'll have to see. We're getting into it. Here we are, the finals of the Gdańsk Regional Championships. Porygon 2 and Charizard coming out for Marco. It is that King Gambit and Electabuzz for Federico.
So both players opting to keep their weather setters in the back. We did get a glimpse of Federico keeping his Pelipper in the back. We don't know if Marco has that Torkoal in the back, but in the weather war such as this, I wouldn't be surprised if there was that Torkoal just lurking in the back.
Well, you've got quite slow Pokemon and quite fast Pokemon on the field, and that speed switching order is going to make all the difference. How is the King Gambit trained compared to the Porygon 2? Not going to come into play this turn as the fastest Pokemon on the field. Charizard decides to switch out for Ursaluna. Try to get that Guts Flame Orb activation as maybe Porygon is opting for a Trick Room.
Terrestrialization of immediately from Federico onto this King Gambit, perhaps wanting to avoid any super effective Fire-type moves now. King Gambit looking extremely wicked with that grin on its head, and Electabuzz going for the follow me, making sure that maybe no Terra Blast fighting comes its way, but that does leave the King Gambit going for a Sucker Punch into the Ursaluna slot, and the Porygon 2 now going for a Terra Blast onto this Electabuzz. Does quite reasonable damage onto it, but Ursaluna, of course, having switched in for free, has the Flame Orb, gets burned, and is ready to go.
Both of these trainers not taking any risks whatsoever. The Electabuzz carrying the taunt could have shut down the Trick Room. We had the Sucker Punch on the King Gambit with the Black Glasses and the Terra Dark. Probably would have been able to take a knockout on the Charizard, if not would have got very, very close. But now this Ursaluna comes in, and again, the speed training of these Pokemon. Ursaluna can be trained to be really slow, but it could be a little bit faster, and if it's trained to be faster than this King Gambit, then there's a lot of damage potential coming onto the board here with this Ursaluna.
Yes, Porygon 2 now going for the Terra fighting option, looking like a mighty warrior, ready to start storming the field. And King Gambit now going for the Protect, just keeping itself nice and safe for this one turn and allowing its teammate Electabuzz to go for a taunt. So no more Trick Room for now. No Trick Rooms and no recovers. It looks like Porygon 2 going for that Terra Blast, a fantastic Protect on that King Gambit, keeping itself safe. And does leave the Ursaluna free to go for a Facade on the Electabuzz, and it is a knockout onto the Electabuzz. Federico losing his first Pokemon in this game.
And losing his ability to go for any form of redirection for the rest of the match. It will be down to what Pokemon are in the back, but with Porygon 2 taunted and gone for a Terra Fighting, this is the perfect time for Pelipper to be switching in. Fighting types, of course, are weak to a Hurricane that the Pelipper can launch out, but it also has the opportunity to Weather Ball. There's some calls here to be made. How do you target down Marco's team if you're Federico? And does Marco take the opportunity to play a little bit more defensively, or is this the turn where the Torkoal comes onto the board?
Oh, we'll see. It is the Torkoal indeed. That sunny sun wiping away all those clouds up in the sky, and the heat is going to be turned on. King Gambit also going to be withdrawn, and we're going to find Federico's final Pokemon, which is going to be that Basculegion. With this fish not having the greatest time in the sun, and the Hurricane misses the incoming Torkoal and allowing this Ursaluna to get the headlong rush
into the Basculegion. It's a one-hit knockout there. That Basculegion is going down. And Marco is playing this game absolutely perfectly. Now the Pelipper is locked onto the field. Hurricane is not very accurate whatsoever. Weather Balls are all going to be fire type, but of course, most importantly, that Charizard is waiting in the wings.
And there's no way for Federico to change the weather now because he's down to his final two Pokemon. So Marco has won the weather war. And now this King Gambit, of course, it can Sucker Punch, but Marco has all four of his Pokemon ready. There's a Porygon 2 in the back with the Terra Blast, Terra fighting, and Federico really has his back against the wall. Ursaluna now switching out, allowing possibly that. Oh, it's going to be the Porygon 2, so wanting to get those really strong fighting time moves onto the King Gambit.
Download boost the special attack of this Porygon 2, which King Gambit is not going to like to see one bit. Hurricane landing its mark into Torkoal, going to weaken the damage from any eruption, and King Gambit going to weaken it further by getting that knockout onto the Torkoal. But Porygon 2 gets in for free. Electabuzz no longer available as an option for Federico with the taunt. So this is the option for Marco to just go for a Trick Room if he wants to do so and allow that Ursaluna to really dominate this endgame.
Yes, Ursaluna free to come in, go for the Protect and just allow the Porygon to set up the Trick Room. Of course, Pelipper does have the super effective Hurricane onto the Porygon too, but in the sun, it is not very accurate. But actually, Charizard coming in and it is Heat Wave time.
But is this a bait?
It could be.
Is this a bait? Is this a Sucker Punch bait into the Charizard? And does Federico know that it's a bait? Does the Ursaluna come in? And does the King Gambit go for a Kowtow Cleave into that slot? Well, this turn, it's not going to be taking that risk.
Mind games upon mind games. King Gambit going for the Protect. Now Pelipper has to face a Sun Booster, Solar Power Booster, Choice Specs Booster in the sun, knocks it down to its Focus Sash. There's no such thing as a resist when you're facing a Charizard in the sun. And the Hurricane misses just to add insult to the injury. Porygon take over the Ice Beam. Oh my goodness, what a fantastic call from Marco. Just completely ignoring this King Gambit. Knowing the King Gambit only has Dark Type moves, so it's not really the biggest threat to this Porygon too. And now Federico really has his back against the wall. Sucker Punch coming off, maybe trying to see how much damage he can do to the Charizard, and it is enough to knock it out. So really good information going into game 2.
That King Gambit does only have Dark type moves, and of course the Porygon 2 is a Terra fighting type. That's not just going to allow it to do super effective damage with this Terra Blast. It's going to allow it to get the one-hit KO as well, even though it isn't quad super effective against this King Gambit. Marco Silva taking game 1 of our finals.
Wow, what a blistering pace that game was. Marco just getting full control of the game and then knocking out 2 of his opponent's Pokemon and forcing that poor Pelipper onto the field so that it couldn't change the weather anymore. And Hurricanes in the sun, it's only 50% accurate, and it is really, really difficult to get it off. And you know, Weather Ball from Pelipper, yes, it becomes the Fire type, but you don't get that same type attack bonus. And Pelipper just, in the end, wasn't quite able to gain that advantage for Federico.
I think this is the thing where Federico was actually playing really nicely in terms of the way that he was using his types to his advantage. That Basculegion switch-in was to be able to take a Terra Fighting Terra Blast from the Porygon 2, but Marco kind of saw right through that and instead went for a headlong rush, saying, well, okay, you've got a King Gambit on the field. Maybe it's not a Steel type anymore, but if I go for a headlong rush, I'm either going to be knocking you out or getting damn close to be able to knocking you out this turn. And if you switch in the Basculegion, I get something extra for that attack that I'm locking into. And I think Federico's got to be really conscious of how he's playing this early game to be able to just put a little bit more offensive pressure on Marco's side.
Yeah, these are both really hyper-offensive teams, so you cannot make any mistakes. And a lot of the Pokemon on these teams are extremely frail, so a really strong attack can just instantly knock them out, and then you're down 1 Pokemon, and it becomes harder and harder to try and claw your way back into the game.
Now, what are you thinking here, Zoe, for switch-ups for Federico? That Electabuzz looked pretty good in the way that it was able to taunt and redirect, but it went down so quickly in that match. Do you think it's the right call for Federico to bring again?
I think Electabuzz does have the Thunderbolt, so it can be offensive. Of course, the taunt is going to be very useful in shutting down the Porygon too, but as you mentioned earlier, you know, it doesn't have quite the damage output and does not enjoy facing off this Ursaluna, but we're going to go straight into game 2. It is going to be the Charizard and the Porygon 2 against, once again, the King Gambit and Electabuzz.
And the question is, the mind games are, does this Charizard go straight on the offensive? Does the King Gambit just go for that Terra Dark Sucker Punch again? We know how much damage that does to the Charizard. That will be able to pick up a quick knockout there. Marco not allowing that to go off this turn. Charizard just switching out again into the Ursaluna.
Yes, now the Terrestrialization coming off once again on Federico on turn 1 onto that King Gambit. Once again becoming very, very malevolent there, staring down at its opponents. King Gambit, we did see the Sucker Punch going off onto that Charizard. So Marco once again protecting his Charizard. Sucker Punch is going to fail and allows the Electabuzz to go for the taunt. So did Marco call this and you go for an attack onto this Porygon 2?
I think it is going to be a Terra Blast here coming out onto that Electabuzz, doing a good amount of damage there. But again, we have the opportunity for that Porygon 2 to just go for its Terra Fighting in this scenario. I believe it got a special attack boost from its download ability in turn 1 yet again, because King Gambit and Electabuzz tend to be trained a little bit more physically defensively. And that gives the Porygon 2 the opportunity to go for that Terra Fighting Terra Blast into the King Gambit. If on this turn the King Gambit goes out into the Basculegion again, it will be able to take that attack. But again, it's calls that we have to make in these situations. This is the Grand Finals, and these trainers have been playing so well all day. You can't call it.
Marco now wanting to match the terrestrialization of his opponent, going for that Terra Fighting Electabuzz, going for a follow me, wanting to redirect attacks away from his teammate, and Porygon 2 going for Terra Blast, Terra Fighting. Is that going to be enough to knock it out? It is not enough. Electabuzz left clean over 15 HP, and Facade now going to be enough to knock out this Electabuzz. And Federico once again losing his Electabuzz very early on and losing that redirection option.
It's a Kowtow Cleave coming from the King Gambit, though, into that Porygon 2, resisted now by the Terra Fighting, maybe calling a little bit of a switch out from Marco to try to reset the taunt on the Porygon 2, but Marco happy to just keep attacking in this situation. Now, Pelipper on the field again. Federico having to bring it in early to put some pressure onto that Porygon 2. If a Sucker Punch and a Hurricane in the sun or out of the sun is able to land on that Porygon 2, maybe there's a chance that that Porygon 2 could get knocked out.
Ursaluna now going to withdraw. This is starting to look quite familiar with what happened in Game 1. Torkoal coming in, resetting the rain once again with its sun. The drought coming across the field. The sun is shining, and Hurricane does connect this time onto the Porygon 2. Not enough to knock it out. Confusion lands on this Porygon. Is this Porygon going to be able to break through the confusion? This is going to be so close. And then again, it starts itself in confusion. Porygon 2 does not get an attack off, allowing the King Gambit to get the Kowtow Cleave off onto the Torkoal, and Torkoal does heavy damage for switching in.
Wow, King Gambit actually from Federico trying to put some pressure onto the other slot, trusting that Hurricane would be able to get him all the way, but the Porygon 2 was able to just hold on that turn. It is taunted, and there is Sucker Punch available, and one thing that we've learned for sure is that that Porygon 2 actually outspeeds the King Gambit. That's great information for us and for our players here as to how they need to play this turn. If an attack went off, that King Gambit could have gone down, so this confusion was absolutely huge.
It is indeed, and Pelipper now can actually go for the 100% accurate Weather Ball onto this Torkoal. It doesn't even need to switch out. Torkoal going for the Protect, just wanting to stall out one turn and try to see what Federico goes for. Weather Ball coming up onto this Porygon 2, knocking it out, and Marco has lost his first Pokemon in this game.
And there is an option for Ursaluna or Charizard to be coming, but there is no longer any option for Trick Room in this match. King Gambit, of course, locking into the Kowtow Cleave into this protecting Torkoal. It's a difficult spot for Marco now. If the Charizard comes in, well, it's going to be susceptible to a Sucker Punch from this King Gambit. If the Ursaluna comes in, we'll have to see how they're trained. And again, Charizard joining the field. Is it a bait, Zoe?
It could be a bait, because we saw in that last game, the King Gambit Terra Dark did so much damage, and Federico, of course, can switch out the Pelipper, and that's exactly what he does, bringing in the Basculegion, so allowing the Pelipper to then later come back in and reset the weather. Once again, King Gambit going for his Protect, maybe trying to scout out if it is a bait. The Charizard does stay in and goes for the Heat Wave. Sun boosted, Solar Power boosted, Choice Specs boosted. It is going to connect on this Basculegion, and with the nice resist, the Torkoal double up into the Basculegion.
Great. This is great. The overheat going into this Basculegion. There's no Intimidate on the field, so the Eject Pack is going to activate on this Torkoal and allow the Torkoal to be switching out this turn. That gets also Marco's weather as well as a KO on the field for him. And now this Pelipper has to come in because the Basculegion's got knocked out. So Ursaluna comes in, and then Pelipper comes in, the rain gets set up, but there is still Torkoal in the back.
Yes, Federico has unfortunately lost the weather wall. Pelipper going to come in once again, trying to bring the storm with her. But we all know what's going to happen. Marco has his son in the back. He can just easily switch in that Torkoal and regain the weather control. Now, King Gambit is very, very threatening here with Sucker Punches. Ursaluna going to switch out, resetting the sun back upon the field and indicating that the Charizard is going to go for the Heat Waves. Is that going to be... which target
is it even going to be coming up? Because we've got a Sucker Punch coming out from this King Gambit.
And it is enough!
It is enough to pick up the KO.
Marco now also down to his final 2 Pokemon, but this King Gambit is suddenly looking incredibly threatening. And Weather Ball onto this Torkoal is not enough to knock it out, but puts it in such heavy range of any attack. Torkoal is now the source Pokemon on the field, and Ursaluna also just does not enjoy being in a match where it's also very slow and just gets outsped.
The question is does this Ursaluna outspeed the King Gambit? We're going to find out very soon as the Sucker Punch does land into the Ursaluna slot there, doing a big chunk of damage. The Weather Ball is the follow-up, but it's into the Torkoal slot.
Wow, now the Ursaluna allows the space for the Ursaluna to go for the facade onto this King Gambit, and it is not enough for this King Gambit to knock out the King Gambit. And now Federico really has Marco in a pin. The Ursaluna will get knocked out by a Sucker Punch, and the Pelipper will just knock out the Torkoal with a Weather Ball. And Marco, recognizing that this game goes to Federico, is going to concede, and we're going to go into a Game 3.
Game 3 here in the Gdańsk Regional Championships. This is what you want to see in every finals. These two trainers, tooth and nail, fighting for the championship trophy here. It is the war of weather. Federico actually lost the weather war in that particular scenario, but he was still able to just find a way through. And it is all about the targeting. If that Charizard hadn't actually gone for the attack and it had switched out, maybe Ursaluna gets a facade into the King Gambit, then it looks like a bit of a different game there. There's a lot of different decisions that these trainers had to make. And the way that Federico was targeting down that Ursaluna, it looks like he was pretty confident that the King Gambit was going to be slower than it and had to go for the Sucker Punch.
Yes, so that's really good information for both of these players. And, you know, King Gambit is just naturally so bulky, able to survive a guts-boosted Ursaluna's facade. And that wasn't with its steel typing, it was dark, it was a neutral attack, and it was able to survive that. And also being, so that King Gambit is just really key, being also, you know, using a Sucker Punch to knock it out. But we are going to get ready very shortly for this Game 3. And here we are, the final game of the Gdańsk Regionals. It's going to be Porygon 2 and Charizard against the Basque Legion and King Gambit.
A big switch up there for our trainers here. And the King Gambit, if that is slower, trained to be slower as we've seen than the Porygon 2, then that's going to give Federico the switch priority in this situation if the Pelipper wants to come in. That's a free attack from the Basque Legion into the Charizard slot. Now, we've seen before, it could be the Ursaluna in the back there. That's definitely not going to like taking a Wave Crash. The Charizard, of course, doesn't like taking a Wave Crash. And yeah, it could be a really nice switch up here for Federico.
As Federico making some really nice adjustments here. Just maybe last game, but we're going to see a turn 1 terrestrialization once again, all 3 games. But it's going to be actually on Marco's side. So Porygon 2 going for the Terra Blast, Terra Fighting. So indicating it might want to start going for the attack and just immediately knock out that King Gambit. But King Gambit very wisely going for a Protect just to scout out what Marco is going to do and allowing the Dragon Pulse to come onto the Basque Legion. But it's not barely enough. That Flip Turn coming out, and it is going to be a one-hit knockout onto this Charizard.
One-hit knockout with that Flip Turn. It's not even a powerful attack, but it's boosted by the same type attack bonus and that choice band that the Basque Legion is holding. That's a huge KO for Federico, keeping that King Gambit safe, bringing in the Electabuzz to redirect any attacks away from that Porygon 2 as well. And of course, the Electabuzz is carrying the Terra Ghost as well. So now that Marco has committed to going for the terrestrialization on the Porygon 2, Federico can react to that with their Electabuzz and try to maybe get a little bit more setup done with the King Gambit. and allow his sucker punches to be doing even more damage.
There's nothing scarier than staring down a +2 King Gambit. But Electabuzz now going for a follow me, keeping its partner safe from any Terra Blast, Terra Fighting. But Headlong Rush coming immediately off this Electabuzz.
Oh,
it's going to be a one-hit knockout. Oh my goodness, what a strong attack. Was that a crit? No,
it wasn't a critical hit. There was no Terra going on
there.
Oh
my goodness.
And the Porygon 2 is going to be able to attack next. King Gambit is going for its Sword Stance in this situation, getting itself boosted up. And it's held on to its Terra, but there's no Electabuzz there anymore. Trick Room can go up because there's no Taunt on the field. King Gambit can now go probably before this Ursaluna and this Porygon 2, but because the Porygon 2 is a fighting type, it's going to be able to launch big Terra Blast into that King Gambit and potentially claim an easy KO.
Porygon 2 is just such a powerful offensive threat right now, and King Gambit also looking very, very scary. But we saw in Game 1, King Gambit was not able to survive a Porygon 2 with the Terra Blast fighting and a +1 special attack. But Federico now once again going for that Terra Dark onto this King Gambit. King Gambit absolutely determined to try and survive any fighting type moves coming its way and trying to get those key knockouts onto Marco's side. Sucker Punch now coming off into the Ursaluna. Is that going to be enough? And it is enough to get another one-hit knockout onto Marco's side.
Basculegion is going to be safe this turn. It's going to be very happy to see that that Sucker Punch was successful in knocking out that Ursaluna. And the Terra Blast coming out from the King Gambit is going to pick up that KO onto the King Gambit there. KOs, 4 KOs against these two hyper-offensive teams. Basculegion going for its last respect, boosted up a little bit more because of that KO onto that King Gambit just last turn. But it is going to be Pelipper and most likely Torkoal coming in here. But because we're in Trick Room, the Torkoal's Drought, if that's the thing that comes in, yeah, is going to be activating first. So it's Federico in this Game 3 that's going to be winning the Weather War.
Oh, wow, Marco's situation looks very, very dire. That Porygon 2 no longer able to be immune to those last respects of this choice band. Basculegion and Torkoal does not enjoy firing off any fire-type moves in the rain. And Torkoal with that, not Torkoal, Pelipper with the Focus Sash can survive one attack, and Federico really has a comfortable position. But Eruption now coming off the...
yeah, that's not the damage that you really want to be seeing, but there is a way, and that way for Marco is to get that recover onto Porygon 2 and try to allow it to survive these turns. Weather Ball landing into the Porygon 2. Last Respect is enough to pick up the KO. We have a Torkoal. It may be in Trick Room, but it is in the rain right now. The Eruption is doing very little damage. And of course, there is Water-type Weather Balls coming out from this Pelipper and this Basculegion.
Yes, Torkoal is a turtle, is a tortoise, not a turtle, and it does very, very sad damage in the rain. Weather Ball now from this Pelipper. It's going to be enough to take the one-hit knock